I wanted to bring up before we go in, move on. Okay, the tabernacle. Somebody tell me, what is the tabernacle? As a review. A tent, okay.
Temporary dwelling.
A temporary dwelling. And who dwells there?
Yeah.
God does. God dwells among the people in that tabernacle. You know, it's strange that Paul tells the Athenian, the Athens, God doesn't dwell in anything made. He doesn't need anything made with hands. You know, he's bigger than that. And yet he's dwelling in a tent. You know, it's just, but that's what God wanted. It isn't like we come up with an idea and we're going to put God in that. No, God said, this is what I want, and that's what they gave him. Which is a lesson for us right there. You know, you find out what God wants, you know, and that's what you do. One of the things was brought up was the tabernacle there was two indications of God's presence. And they were?
Pillar of smoke and pillar of fire.
Correct. By smoke or a cloud by day and fire by night. What happens if that fire or that cloud moved?
They didn't move.
Time to go.
Pack it up.
Pack it up. And there was a sequence to how it had to be packed up. I found that out. I found some stuff out. I didn't realize they had oxen and carts to move the stuff. I always thought, well, they got to put it on their shoulders and do it the hard way. Every one of them just, no. They had 3 divisions, and each family, the Gershonites, the Kohathites, and the Merarites, each had a certain part of the tabernacle to pick up and move. And it's kind of ironic that the Korah in Numbers chapter 16 is the one that rebelled, and he was of the family of the Kohathites. And I know it's just the way it looked, the Kohathites, they had I'll say it, maybe I can't prove it, but in my gut feeling is, they were closer to God because of the stuff they moved than anything else. They're moving the covenant, Ark of the Covenant. You just look at it and you're dead. You touch it, you're dead. You know, it's like that power line we were talking about Sunday. You know, you touch it and you're cooked. You have to rely on that priest to cover that thing up with 2 different tarps before you can put a pole in it and walk out with it. They're a lot closer to God in a sense, physically, than any of the other groups. The other groups, well, they get the tarps and they get the sheets and the coverings and they haul them out. The other ones pull the boards up and they haul them out. But these people are hauling out and carrying the stuff that is the furniture, the important stuff, you know. And they're the ones that rebelled. And Moses got on to them about, you know, it's, yeah, I want to read that in Numbers 16. They rose up, in verse 2 there, it said, they rose up before Moses together with some of the Israelites, 250 leaders of the congregation. Not just anybody, but leaders of the congregation of Israel. And chose of the congregation in assembly men of renown. They assembled together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, you've gone far enough. For all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? When Moses heard this, he fell on his face. What would he fall on his face for? Why would you do that? I mean, the people are getting in your face about you're out of line, you're going too far, you're taking too much authority, and he hits the ground. What's he doing? Why would he fall on his face when in front of somebody that just accused him of doing something wrong?
He's doing what God wants now.
He's doing what God wants, but I think he fell on his face. Maybe he was ducking. I don't know.
Well, sort of.
I think
Ducking for them.
He's fell on his face, and I think he's praying to God. He's showing humbleness. He's begging God in a sense. He's not saying a word, but he fell on his face on the ground. And he spoke to Korah and all the company, saying, tomorrow morning the Lord will show you who who is his, and who is holy, and will bring him near to himself. Even the one whom he will choose, and he will bring him near to himself. Do this. Take censers for yourself. And the censer is what? What's a censer?
It's a metal contraption that holds incense.
Or coals. It's a metal pan that would put coals or incense, lighted fuel for a fire. Okay? You bring your metal censers and put fire in them and lay incense upon them in the presence of the Lord tomorrow, and the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the one who is holy. You've gone far enough, you sons of Levi. And Moses said to Korah, hear now, is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself? You're moving his furniture. You're getting up close and personal with God every time we move. That's what he's telling them. It's not enough for that. You have to bring, you to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord and to stand before the congregation to minister to them, and that he has brought you near, Korah, and all your brothers, sons of Levi, with you. And are you seeking for the priesthood also? You know, they were all of the Levites, but the Levites were separated. They were different divisions, and it was just like you got the military, but you have the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, all different departments, but it's all military. We had the Levites, but we had the Kohathites, we had the Gershonites, we had the Merarites, and we have the Levites. And the Levites are the priests. They're the ones that do everything pertaining to the law inside that tabernacle. They're the only ones that could go in there. But here he's telling you want the priesthood also? I love what he tells them. Therefore, you and all your company, your 250 men, gather together against the Lord, but as for Aaron, who is he that you grumble against him? Then Moses sent a summons to Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they said, we will not come up. I don't think they wanted to get into this, but they were part of it. So he said, it's not enough that you have brought us up out of the land of flowing milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness. We'll back up a minute. They just described Egypt as a land flowing with milk and honey. Have we been out? How long have we been out? A year, maybe? I think this is about a year. They already forgot how good it was in Egypt. Well, that was milk and honey. Yeah. Bring us out in this desert to die. No, you were slaves and being mistreated. Indeed, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor have you given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Would you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. Then Moses became very angry and said to the Lord, do not regard their offering. I have not taken a single donkey from them, nor have I done harm to any of them. Moses said to Korah, you and all your company be present before the Lord tomorrow, both you and they along with Aaron. They're going to have a showdown. That's basically what they're doing. He said, you bring your incense, you bring your fire pans with your fire in it, and you present the incense before God, and then we'll see who's selected. I don't think it got that close. It never even got that close. So he says in verse 17, each of you take his fire pan, put incense on, and each of you bring a censer before the Lord. 250 fire pans. Also you and Aaron shall each bring his fire pan. So they each took his own censer and put fire on it, laid incense on it. They stood at the doorway of the tent of meeting with Moses and Aaron. I'm not sure if that would have been the outer court or that would have been the inner court, the wall of the tabernacle itself. But Korah assembled all the congregation against them at the doorway of the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them instantly. God's ready to do away with everybody. It says, it's another lesson for another time, but Steve brings it up a lot of times. corrupt friend, bad friends, bad company will bring you down. It'll corrupt good morals. How about if you got a bunch of people selected by God, but they're just aggravating, they want to complain about everything. Nothing's right. Every day, and where did Moses end up? Where did it get him? It drug him down. I think in my mind, and this is just skipping a whole lot of time, Moses got fed up with them people and he got aggravated with them, and that's when he lost his cool and he struck the rock instead of speaking to it. He was frustrated because of the people around him. That's a lesson right there for all of us. You know, we don't want to be that bunch of people. We don't want to be a bunch of complainers all the time, because it brings down everybody. Nobody is uplifted by that. Even Moses was drugged down. So getting back to the story, that was free, by the way. The Lord, they fell on their faces. They fell on their faces and said, "Oh God, God of the spirits of all flesh, when one man sins, will you be angry with the entire congregation?" They're begging for God not to destroy all of Israel. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the congregation, saying, get back from around the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Back up, get away." You ever been in a situation where something's going to happen, you know it's going to happen, and you start backing up before anybody else? Yeah. You see it's going to happen, or that's going to blow up. It's going to pop. And you start backing up. Maybe it's out of fear, maybe out of respect, out of experience. God said, get everybody from around there. Moses went to Dathan, Abiram, with the elders of Israel following him. And he spoke to the congregation, said, "Depart now from the tents of these wicked men. Touch nothing that belongs to them, or you will be swept away in all their sin." So they got back from around the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the doorway of their tents, along with their wives, their sons, and their little ones. Moses said, "By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these deeds, for this is not my doing. If these men die the death of all men, or if they suffer the fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about an entirely new thing, and the ground opens and swallows its mouth and swallows them up with all that is theirs, and they descend alive into Sheol, then you will understand that these men have spurned the Lord." That's exactly what happened. All because they're grumbling and rebelling against God. And they were the ones that were actually, and like Moses said, you're the closest one to God. You're the one that moves his furniture. You're in his house every time it moves. We have to trust you to do it. And yet you're going to complain. They're gone. It said, as he finished these words, the ground that was under them split open. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up and their households and all the men who belonged to Korah with all their possessions. So they all that belonged to them went down alive to Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And then I believe the fire came out and burned up everybody that had the other 250 men that were trying to get this incense to burn, and fire consumed them. And it was an amazing thing, but one of the things I read about when I was studying about the tabernacle, somebody said the altar of burnt offering is covered with bronze. Somebody said, that won't last. Bronze, I know Carrie's pretty familiar with this. That would just get hot and it'll eat up after a while. It won't last very long. What did Moses tell them to do with the bronze fire pans that those 250 men brought? Beat it out, and we'll use it to line the burnt offering, the altar of burnt offering later on. So it's something that one of the people online brought up. This thing won't last very long. They knew that, because they're going to reline it with the pans that the guys tried to take over with. So it's you know, you think, oh, I found a little glitch here. This won't work, but they knew it. It's no glitches. Yeah. So yes, okay, the tabernacle, we talked about that a little bit. We talked about that a lot Sunday, didn't we? Let me get the notebook out. I found notes for a lesson I hadn't even done yet. And we made a comment Sunday, we're making a comment again, the same comment. You do things God's way or our way. And this, the Korah is another example of that. You do things God's way or you do it your way. And which way works? It's not our way. Yeah, we talked about Numbers chapter 4 has got the Kohath, the Gershon, and the Merari. All of those did different parts of moving the tabernacle. Kohath had all the articles inside the tabernacle, all the furniture, which there were 7 pieces. What were they? There was the altar of burnt offering, the table of showbread, there was the light stand, the 7 lamp stand. What was it also? The bronze laver. There was the Ark of the Covenant, and the
Altar of incense.
Huh?
Altar of incense.
Altar of incense. Correct. Was there 6 or 7? I thought there were 7. 1, 2, 3, 6, I guess. So that was all the articles they had to move. And then the Gershonites, they had to take all the coverings down. Because this thing is, nothing's permanent. It's all been made to move. And it's all big tent. Steve said it's a tent. But it's got wood inside of it, covered with gold. Nothing substantial there. And they have to get all the coverings and fold them up, put them on a cart. How did the Kohath, when they moved the furniture, how did it get moved? All by hand. Had poles and rings. Everything had a ring on it. But what's the best thing you put? What's the best thing you get married? You put a ring on your finger, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Well, they put rings on all the furniture. Stick a pole through there. Don't try that. Pick them up, 4 guys, and carry the stuff out. Yes, that's the way it was done. That's been, and I think, and I'm going to give David the benefit of a doubt. They hadn't done this for years and years and years. When you're living in Jerusalem, it's been sitting still. They haven't moved. But they did remember there was carts used, oxen used, so maybe he figured he could move the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, with an ox cart when the Philistines sent back. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But if you don't know, ask. You know, that's just like saying, well, I think it'll work. I think this is what God wants, so I'm going to do it this way. That's not what you need to do. That's what David did. I think this is what God will do. It'll work. It was a new cart. Steve brought that up Sunday. It was a brand new cart. There's nothing ugly about that. And they put an ox in front of it and pull it. Yeah, that'll work. I'm sure that'll work. It seemed like I saw somewhere they did that before. No, it wasn't exactly. That's what we've got to do. If your soul depends on it, I think it'll work is not close enough. You got to be sure. You know, I've always felt, man, that was just, wow, what in the world? He did the right thing, but he did it wrong. Or he did the wrong thing the right way. I don't know. But you don't reach up and touch the thing, because that was no, you don't touch it. You're not qualified. I think even if the Kohathites were moving that thing on the poles and it got away from them, they grabbed a hold of it, I think it would still be a death sentence to them. Because it's not supposed to be touched.
You know, I don't think David understood either, because David, was angry
He got,
with God.
Yes.
That he killed Uzzah, so he wouldn't even take it to his house to take it.
just put it over here, just leave it there. Yes, he got angry with God because how can we stand before God? That was one of the statements that he made. Well, if you don't have any knowledge, you can't stand before God. Knowledge is what makes us standable, I guess, that word. You think about it, it makes you where you can stand before God. If you've got the knowledge to know what's right and wrong, and know how to act before God and in God's house, you take it upon yourself to do it some other way, who are you going to get mad at? David got mad at God. That's kind of like, ooh, okay. Okay, so the Gershonites, they moved all the curtains. And the Merarites, they're the ones that had the heavy load. They had all the gold-plated boards. Yes, sir.
One thing about the weight of this Ark of the Covenant for a minute.
Okay.
Most of us men in here have been pallbearers at one point. And it takes 6 men most of the time to carry a coffin. This was 4 men carrying a box that was overlaid with gold.
Yep.
With 2 stone tablets in it, plus Aaron's rod and manna and stuff like that. This thing wasn't light.
No.
So there's some guesstimations, was it 200 pounds? But the overlay of the gold, people's tried to do some calculations of that, and it's upwards around 2,500 pounds. So God probably had a hand in whoever was carrying this thing, because you're talking about traveling.
Yeah.
I couldn't even imagine 6 guys traveling with a coffin, 40 miles, 100 miles, whatever it was. It's just unreal. So I think God had to have had a hand in helping the Levites be extra strong or whatever while carrying this thing correctly.
Yeah, I've got a thing here that said the total weight of the wood,
2,500.
just the wood would have been right at 3,300 pounds of wood.
Yeah.
Just the wood,
And
without
then
gold plating.
gold, you're talking about 4 men,
Yes.
that's crazy weight.
Ma'am?
Gold is really heavy.
Gold is really heavy. And how many talents of gold were offered or donated to that? 29 talents. And I think a talent was 700, no, forgetting, 125 pounds? It's crazy. It was, I was looking it up, probably on my phone still. 'Cause I was saying, I was wondering how much gold was involved in this thing. Let me see.
Even if this thing weighed 400 pounds total,
Yeah.
100 pounds per person to travel with that, it's just.
And not walking across the desert.
Right, we're looking at
Yeah.
thousands.
And they would have left in an order too. You think about, okay, the cloud is moving, we've got to load this thing. They said it would take about 3 hours to break this thing down. Okay, 3 hours, we've got to be moving. The first thing that would be moving would be the boards. They've got to get there first and lay it out. Okay, then the coverings have got to get there. They've got to get the top on there. They've got to get the wall between the holy and most holy. All these sheets, these tapestries, things have got to be put up. Then the furniture shows up. Just like building a house, you got to have a house to put the furniture in. So yes, it was. So they had to show up, and I can't imagine. Even if it was 400 pounds, I don't know how heavy a coffin I've ever carried, but you got 6 guys. Yeah, it's a heavy. But what I read was 3,300 pounds worth of wood. Now these are boards. I've been working with wood here the last year doing that addition, and that stuff adds up quick. You take 4 or 5 2x4s on your shoulder, you've got a good load. And this stuff is, of course, they're putting it on ox cart. That's an advantage. But the furniture couldn't be put on an ox cart. It had to be manhandled. I've got one of those, let me find it. Is it in there, my papers? You're supposed to jog my memory. My memory pills aren't kicking in yet. I read one last week, and this guy's online, and he calls his little website Sabbath Thoughts, and it's by Jeremy. I don't know his last name. And he had a thing here that said chumps who had to move the tabernacle, but I put them in because I don't feel like that would be respectful. But it made sense what he said. The Israelites spent 40 years wandering through the wilderness on the way to the promised land. That's 40 years of setting up camp, taking down camp. 40 years. Every time God told them to move, it was a process. Setting up, taking down, setting up, taking down, setting up, and on and on and on. I don't know. Maybe that's why Korah got upset. You hear you're going to move again? I'm sure that got old real quick. I'm tired of setting up and I'm tired of taking down tents after showing camping trip. And that's with a modern lightweight tent held up by those fancy fiberglass rods that practically put themselves together. I know what he's talking about there. The Hebrew text isn't super definitive on the point, but I feel confident saying that those weren't the kind of tents the Israelites used. The Levites, in addition to worrying about their own tents, they had to move the tabernacle. The ornately designed, beautifully crafted, holy place that served both as a physical reminder of the presence of God and as a centerpiece of the camp of Israelite camp. For 40 years, the Levites' responsibility for taking it apart and putting it back together. Every board, every socket, every curtain, every cord, every pillar, the Levites, the ones who had to load them up and make sure everything made it to the next campsite at the right order, at the right time. Setting up, taking down, setting up, taking down, setting up. Then he brings up this. I had to look this thing up because I never heard of it. Anybody ever heard of a hyoid bone? I got stuttered there, didn't I? Hyoid, hyoid bone. It's the bone right above your Adam's apple if you're a guy. Right? You know, it's high up, real high up there. It is not very big, it's not very obvious, but you'd notice if it went missing. The hyoid is a unique bone because it's not directly anchored to the other bones of your skeleton. It floats. It's a U-shaped bone. You feel it at the top of your throat, and it's technically just floating. It's attached by ligaments and muscles to the muscles at the floor of your mouth, your tongue, your larynx, your epiglottis, and your pharynx. All these attachments mean that your hyoid plays an important role in some everyday activities you probably don't think twice about, like swallowing, speaking, breathing. Like I said, you'd notice if it was missing. And yet, important as it is, when's the last time you heard someone make a comment about the appreciation of their hyoid bone? I didn't know I had one until I started doing this lesson. We talk about more important spotlight bones, like the bone in your knee, your ribs, your hip bone, your neck bone. Even talking about your lungs, your neck, your stomach, your eyes, all this stuff. But you just let one little bone. Smaller parts like the metacarpals, the little bitty ear bones inside your ear, they're the hammer and the anvil and what's the stirrup, right? Yeah. Little bitty bones. I'll be honest though, until I started writing this blog this guy writes here, I didn't even know what the bone was even called, much less what it did. But then it doesn't need me to know about it, does it? However much or little you know about your hyoid, it's there every day doing its job, making sure you can do those simple little things like breathing and swallowing. When most of us talk about the Levites, we're usually talking about the Levitical priesthood. The priesthood is actually a much smaller sliver of the pie. Broadly speaking, the tribe of Levi can be subdivided into primary family groups. The sons of Kohath, the sons of Gershon, the sons of Merari, and then Levi. Each of these family clans were responsible for part of the tabernacle when it was time to move camp. The Kohathites moved the holy items of the sanctuary, but only after the priest had covered them up. The Gershonites took care of things like the curtains and screens as well as the coverings of the tabernacle itself. The Merarites were responsible for all the structural elements of the tabernacle, all the boards, the pillars, the sockets, the bars that held everything together. And that's in Numbers 4, chapter 4, verse 1 through 33. The priests of the tabernacle, the ones who actually performed the sacrifices on behalf of Israel, were from a much narrower lineage. All the priests were sons of Moses' brother, Aaron, who himself was also Kohathite. The rest of the tribe of Levi, the Gershonites, the Merarites, and the remaining Kohathites were tasked with serving as support for the priests as they ministered before God on behalf of Israel. But only the priests were allowed to come near the articles of the sanctuary of the altar. For anyone else, including the other Levites, this was a death sentence. It's not surprising that the priests tend to take the spotlight over the other Levitical brethren. They were the ones who made the sacrifices that pointed toward the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus. They were the ones who interacted with the holy things inside the tabernacle. The high priest was the one who stood before the Ark of the Covenant on the Day of Atonement to make intercession for God's people. In so many ways, they were the stars of the show. They were the intercessors. They were the judges. They were the middlemen between the nation of Israel and God. But the rest of the Levites, well, they were just chumps that had to move the tabernacle. How many sermons and articles have you encountered about Levitical priesthood? A bunch, I'm sure. And how many focusing on the duties of the Kohathites, the Gershonites, and the Merarites? One or two, maybe? Maybe none. Honestly, if it wasn't for the rebellion of Korah, I'm not sure how long the Kohathites would have flown under my radar. And that's the story of a Kohathite who felt like he'd been given the short end of the stick. These guys were the hyoid bone of Israel. They had a role to play, but when reading through the Old Testament, it's easy to forget they were even there, or ever noticed them in the first place, because they operated in the edge of the Bible's narrative. It's easy to assume they never contributed anything particularly meaningful to the bigger picture, at least until we ask the question. The big, obvious, sitting right in front of us question: what happens when there were nobody to move the tabernacle? What happens when the Kohathites, the Gershonites, and the Merarites don't show up for work? The tabernacle stays where it is. Sure, the whole rest of Israel could journey on to the next campsite, but what happens when there's no altar for the offerings? No table for the showbread, no curtain for the Ark of the Covenant, no ark, no periods, nothing, no walls, no coverings, nothing. The priests might have been the ones in the spotlight, but the rest of the Levites were the ones who built the theater. Even though most of the Levites never came near the holy things of the tabernacle, never saw them uncovered, never interacted with them, they were completely indispensable to the continued functioning of the tabernacle. They had a role to play, and even though it wasn't the most glamorous or front and center role, it was a role that made the entire operation possible. Just like the hyoid bone in your throat. The lesson here, which I'm hoping is obvious, and that's the reason I'm reading this, isn't really about the Levitical families that wandered the desert 1,000 years ago. It's really about obscure skeleton components reciting. It's not about skeletal components reciting in our throats either. It's about you, and it's about me. We don't all get to be a preacher. Not at work, not at church, not in our social circle, not even at home. He put, we don't all get to be priests, but it says we're all priests, so I had to scratch through that. We're all priests. We don't get to be all the ones operating front and center when everyone can see us, making obvious and unmistakable contributions to the community we're part of. Most of us are going to be operating in the background, behind the scenes. A lot of people might go their entire lives without being aware of what actually we bring to the table. That's okay. If you had gone the rest of your life without knowing about the hyoid bone, it's still important. It's still there, doing its job, helping you to speak, swallow, and breathe. You don't need to acknowledge it for it to be an important part of your body. It just is, by the very nature of its contribution. The body of Christ is joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share. It causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. That's in Ephesians 4. We're all, and I always thought, I just break off right there and make a comment. You always thought about, I want to be the neck bone so I can tell everybody where to go to the point. I want to be the eyes, or you don't want to be a foot. That's just, nobody wants to be a foot, right? But when you hit your toe on the corner of the bed, what happens? Where do your hands go? Grab that toe. Oh man, that hurt. Yeah. They don't care. That's important. So every one of us, we may all be toes. We can't all be toes, can we? But get the point. We're all important. Doesn't matter what part we play. You don't know how every joint in your physical body works, and I guarantee that there's some spiritual joints you've never even heard of. Vital, contributing members of the body that you never meet in this life. That's okay. It's okay to be the hyoid. It's okay to be a Kohathite, a Gershonite, or Merariite. A lot of us are. You're still important. You still have value. You still contribute. We still need you. keep doing what you're doing. So you don't want to rebel and say, I want more, I want to be more than I am. But you have a part to play in the congregation, in life, in this world. Do the best you can with what you got. Be the best bone you ever had in your throat, right? You knew what it was. So you were right pointing there. Yeah. So you don't want to be, and I didn't like the way he said a chunk moving the tabernacle, but that's basically how they felt probably. All I'm doing is just moving, man. No, it doesn't work if you don't do your job. So that's another thing that was brought up. When the cloud moved, they moved. When the cloud stopped, they stopped. That's another lesson we can bring to us today from the tabernacle. Sir?
How long did that last?
That's lasted until lasted right on into when they started taking over the Canaan.
Well, it says in the first paragraph on page 59, or 58, that it lasted almost 500 years later.
Well, that would be until they built the temple, and now it's not moving anymore. The temple was a solid wall and mortar, solid roof building that they put all of the 6 or 7 pieces of furniture in there. Now it's at home, and it is permanent. The other thing was we can pick up and move it tomorrow. So it was the whole 40 years, and then from the time they went into Canaan, through the judges, through everything, right up till Solomon. I mean, this is a bunch of years. I want to know, in my mind, I want to know how many times they rebuilt that thing.
Yeah.
Got a hole in the tent. We got to sew it back up. I know they closed it, and where out in the 40 years they walked around and wandered in the wilderness, they had to be some ugly, some angry women. Think about it. They got to wear the same set of shoes for 40 years. That ain't, come on, girls, y'all tell me now. How many gonna wear the same set of shoes for 40 years? Same dress, same robe? No. But yet, they never wore out. I don't think the tabernacle would have worn out either, but after, get moved in, things start wearing out. Then you're in the promised land. So that's the structure. It has to be kept up. And that would go back to the men doing the job. The Levites, which is a bunch more than just the priest. But what a point I was going to make, okay, when the cloud moved, they moved. When God tells us to move, we move. When God tells us to stop, that's where we stop. And that's the limitations in the Bible. We know we can't go beyond what the Bible says. That's our stop and go. They didn't go beyond, they didn't leave before. And we can't do this, we got to do the same thing. We can't go beyond what God said, and we can't come up short. I can just imagine, Kohath said, well, you know what, we're only going to carry this thing halfway to that camp. We're tired, we're going to stop here. And like the guy said, what happens when they get there? They don't have a tabernacle, because they didn't want to go the full length. Yes. So there's a lot of little lessons that you can get out of this tabernacle that just said, wow, okay. Sorry, Kevin, I didn't do much on your lesson, but it was some things that come to my mind as I'm going to just do it that way. But any more comments? I need some comments, sir. I know y'all got questions or comments. Go ahead, Greg. You see like you just got one right on the tip of your tongue. Just let it go. Guarantee I won't know the answer.
We got one back here.
Okay, John?
What you said about Moses bowing down,
Yeah.
praying, I think you're right. But I also think that with these 250 people pointing their fingers at him saying, who are you? Why are you the leader? Well, putting him up like that. I think maybe Moses was humbling himself before God too, as well as praying.
Yeah. And also, this is going to hurt when he hits them.
I too think John's right. I think they were tired of being told what to do. Like, why are you always the boss? Why you have to be in charge? Why can't we, make some of the decisions? You know?
I agree with you, but if God said that's the way I want it, then who are we? And that's what Moses said, okay, we'll figure this out tomorrow, y'all show up, bring your fire pans with you. And it didn't work out too good for him. Yes, I feel like, he might have been hitting the ground, figured that something's fixing to wipe him out, or he's hitting the ground showing that he's lower than them. I'm not anybody, I'm nobody. That's the way we should be. Yes, sir.
You put any thought into the fact that Moses pointed out that God's gonna do a new thing? It's not just gonna be awesome tomorrow, terrifying, but what he's gonna do has never been done before. Did that
No.
stick out off the page to you?
I didn't catch that one.
He's gonna do a new thing.
He's
So
going to show who he's chosen a different way.
it points to the original creativity. I know in a very dark way, but nevertheless, in that God in his power is not copying someone else. Every false god copies. I want to say, and it may not be fair, it's at least arguable, that every great invention man has, we're copying something that God already invented in the animals or in the universe. We're not original, he's original. In good times and in bad, he is the original. And so I think he was pointing something out there that may be bigger than I'm catching on, but he's definitely saying something, because he could have just said, tomorrow you're in big trouble. He said, no, tomorrow he's going to do a new thing. Just so in case you think I'm doing all this magic.
It's God.
Right.
Okay. Karen, Aaron, you got your hand up? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's about the Israelites' journey. All they did was complain the whole way.
Every day.
And they seen all this that God has done for them, and the whole way, all they did was complain.
I don't think they made 30 days before they were complaining.
Yeah, always.
You come out of Egypt, you just saw half of Egypt just decimated. Physically, structurally, financially, spiritually, just decimated. Get them out there, 30 days in the wilderness there. Oh, why did he bring us out here to die? We could have stayed back there where it was so good. Yes, they had the shortest memory, and they were that way
The whole trip.
the whole trip.
The Hebrews sometimes do complain that do not get under the Lord's skin. Do not bother him. It's not so much as bad as complaining, but the way this group was complaining was a slap in the face, calling Egypt by the term that he says, I'm going to take you to.
Flowing with milk and honey.
Right. So
We were already there.
They were
yeah.
beyond ornery in the way that they voiced their heartache. It's not wrong to voice your heartache to God. It is wrong
No,
to challenge God.
I agree with that, because I feel like that David, he voiced a lot of heartache in there, and a lot of times in songs, like, ooh, he said that?
Right.
No, you don't say that to God.
Right.
But that was heartfelt. It was the way he approached it with dignity, with respect,
Right.
with honor.
Right.
But these people are just, man,
Moses has saved their life many times.
mm.
Praying to God and talking to him.
Yes, it's a lesson, a lot of lessons there we can get from it. I had a whole nother half a lesson or another lesson on the Passover. That was a whole different, another things that I got into. Yes, sir.
It's also interesting, we don't see where they had to replace any of the tent or fabric or anything like that. It's like the veil, they use that tabernacle for 400 or 500 years. Not just 40 years of wandering, but before they
Yeah.
built the
I don't
temple.
know.
And nowhere does it say that they had to replace any of that stuff.
Who would have replaced it? I guess they would have replaced it when they take it down, cover it up, put a new one up. There's always a procedure. When they do line work, there's a procedure they go into. You cover your way into that work, and you uncover the work coming out. You never just go inside. You got 3 power lines up there on that arm. You don't swing under that button, get on that throw, and I'm gonna work on this one. You got 2 hot ones behind you there. No, you cover yourself going in, and you work out, you do your work, and you uncover coming out. And that's what they would have to do with this this tabernacle here, you would have to cover it up to do any work in there to maintain the building. There's procedures. And if you don't follow procedures, you're fried.
After the wandering of 40 years, as far as we know, it stayed put after the land of Canaan, right? For the most part?
Did it stay put?
I believe so.
I don't know, but I don't know if it moved with them. Well, they moved it on their own when they went to the Philistines.
Right.
They were losing the battle, and they decided, we'll get the ark up here and we'll win this battle. God didn't say move that ark. That was part of their deal. You know, that was like, like putting God in a box and he'll take care of it. We'll put him out there. And that's when they lost the ark. So, what do we do now? That's when, what was his name?
Dagon.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the high priest back at home that fell back on his head and broke his neck when he heard about it. What was his name? It wasn't Samuel. The one before.
Eli?
It was Eli, yeah. When he heard the ark, yeah, we lost the battle and we lost the Ark of the Covenant. Oh, man. He fell back and broke his neck. We just, yeah, you don't do that. Come on in, we're done. I see her back there looking.
Who's leading the song tonight? Is that you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I imagine he'll pick out something soon enough. I'll go ahead and get started. Tonight I get to do the invitation, and when I do the invitation, I like to do this day in history. Today's May 28th. A lot of great things happened on May 28th. A lot of great things. But the one I'm going to talk about happened in 1957. For me, when I was growing up, 1957 was a good year that I thought of. I wasn't alive yet, but when everybody talked about great years in the history of America, 1957 seemed to be a number that would come up quite often. And I don't know if it had anything to do with the most popular year for the Chevy Bel Air. I don't know. But for whatever reason, 1957, every time I think of 1957, I think of something pleasant. Well, I wonder, I'm going to ask you a question after I read you this verse. In Psalm 100, it says, enter his gates, verse 4 and 5. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him, bless his name, for the Lord is good. His loving kindness is everlasting, his faithfulness to all generations. Now, when we think about that, we read verses like that, of which there are many, talking about God's faithfulness. You might have a temptation, if you're human like me, you might have a temptation to say something that's completely unfair, and I'm going to say ignorant. Sometimes, in the past, I have thought of an ignorant thing to say when I read something about God being faithful. And that is, well, yeah, of course, He's faithful. He's God. That's an ignorant thing to say. And what it lacks is perspective. If you're not impressed with the scriptures that say God is faithful, or that His faithfulness is everlasting, what I needed and continue to need is perspective. Who in here has ever heard the name Pee Wee Reese? Anybody raise your hand? I got a couple. Pee Wee Reese, all-star shortstop, 10-time all-star. Who has ever heard of Don Drysdale? Oh, a few more. Has anybody heard of Jackie Robinson? All right. Getting some hands up in here. Those three people have something in common. They played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Now, I know none of you are baseball fans like me, but bear with me here. I want you to, I ask you to put on your sandal and your tunic. I want you to put on your Brooklyn baseball cap. I want you to imagine you're a little boy. And in 1957, May 28th, your team is granted the right to move away from Brooklyn and go to California, of all places. You were raised rooting for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Your daddy took you to the ball game, and it was a fond memory that you had growing up. And you and your dad said how great the Brooklyn Dodgers are, and look at they do this and they do that. They're so much better than the Yankees, and oh, that's our team. Yeah, that's right, Dad. And then one day you hear that the team with these great stars, they're just going to up and leave you. And you may not have an empathy. You may not be able to understand the pain that's in it, but I want you to know that it caused pain. You went to the ball games. You paid good money to support that team when they were nobody. And they're just going to up and leave? You were faithful to that team. And they're just going to up and leave and break my son's heart? There were small businesses that depended on that team being drawing a huge crowd so that they could sell whatever it is they were selling. They depended on that for their small business and had stuck by them through thick and thin. And yet one day, in this heralded year, in this heralded country, 1957, May 28th, they're told, you know what, you don't have to be loyal at all to the city that made you what you are, bragged about you all these years. You can just go for the money. Doesn't matter that in Los Angeles is a huge city, they can make their own team, same way you did, Brooklyn. They can raise up their team from nothing. No, they got to steal your team. When you were faithful to the Brooklyn Dodgers, there's a line in Kevin Costner's movie. I'm not recommending you see it, but it's stuck in my head, so I'm going to say it. There's a line in it. Gene Hackman plays Wyatt Earp's father. And Wyatt Earp is in jail. He broke the law, and he's all upset. And his father, Gene Hackman plays, comes up to him while he's looking through the jail bars, and he says to him, "You think you're the first one to ever feel loss? That's what life is about. Loss." And that stuck in my head. I thought, what a statement. Loss. But the older I got, the closer I am to understanding he's not very far off. This life, you could poetically argue, is about loss. Because you can't hang on to any of it. This life is set to disappoint. Is this what I picked for an invitation, a downer? No. Not at all. I bring that up because, again, we go back to what we can depend on. Now maybe I can get rid of that ignorant way of saying, so what? You're God, of course you're faithful. Oh really? You're just going to take God for granted? That He's faithful? When no one else is. And nothing else is. Now you start to see how you can appreciate God more for what He is and what He's offering. There's a phrase that echoes through the Bible, that He will never leave you nor forsake you. That's a great promise for only one reason. He can back it up. That's a great promise because of one reason. You can count on it. The phrase, you can take that to the bank, does not say it. Because you can't even trust the bank. I will never leave you nor forsake you. That's the promise He made the Israelite. He told them and He warned them in Deuteronomy, stay faithful to me because I will not fail you. And they failed Him over and over, and He forgave them over and over. They forsook Him over and over and over. And finally it come time to where, okay, I warned you and you broke it countless times. Only the faithful can come into this new covenant. But what I love in Revelation 21, He tells His people, that's you and me, something just absolutely gorgeous about His promise. He talks about heaven, and he says in Revelation 21, starting in verse 22, I saw no temple in heaven, for the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. And the city has no need of the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God has illuminated it, and its lamp is the Lamb. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it in the daytime, for there will be no night there. Its gates will never be closed, and they will bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it, and nothing, here's the best part, nothing unclean and no one who practices abomination and lying shall ever come into it, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. New King James put it this way, nothing will enter in that will defile it. Nothing will enter in that will ruin what faithful people have been promised. That's a great promise. And it really rings true when I think to myself, how I know that I fall short of the glory of God. But I am devoted to faithfulness to God. I know the difference between being faithful, and I know the difference between being perfect, and I also know the difference between being rebellious and not caring about God. God is perfectly faithful, and He's making that promise, and He says, nobody can ruin it for you. And He has my attention for the rest of my days. Because I see one thing after another, the longer I'm on this earth, something always ruins a good thing. Always. No matter what your solution is, no matter who your leader is, no matter what piece of real estate you got, doesn't matter. It might have some good times. But just wait a little bit. It's going to have some bad times. That's what this life has. But do not let that in any way tarnish the promise that God has made you. What has He promised you? Life everlasting in a place where nobody can ruin it. I'm going. He's given me his gospel. He says, if you will obey the gospel, if you will walk faithfully with me unto death, you can be with me there in paradise. And I invite everybody I get the chance. I invite everybody to go with me. And I invite you tonight. We're going to sing a song,
347.
number 347, to encourage one another to be right with God, the faithful God, the God who cannot fail, the God who is always good and better to us than we could ever be for him. Are you following Jesus? I pray that you are. If not, you can start that tonight. We invite you to do so as we stand and sing this song.